All right, so good. So let's go ahead and move on to the answer. Whoops, nope, I didn't want to do that. Go back, go back. You still need to be on that one. Okay, so of the major counseling theories, which one has the most research behind it? That's going to be behavioral, cognitive behavioral, and rational emotive. So it's going to be this answer right here. Reality and Gestalt. Gestalt's actually hard to measure because it's about energy blocks and things like that. Person-centered is pretty hard to measure. And then Adlerian is not as evidence-based as behavioral and rational. So of the two possible answers, behavioral, cognitive, behavioral, rational motive, and Adlerian rational motive, behavioral, cognitive, behavioral would be the better answer. Okay, so that would be the best answer. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, in this one, in a training session on ethical and legal issues, the trainer discusses the number of professional issues of which counselors should be aware. At one point, he asked participants this question: name a professional counselor activity that does not require the passage of a state law. The trainer took responses from the audience. Jackson said involuntary commitment. Marcia said licensure. Naomi suggested accreditation, and Phil said privileged communication. The correct response came from whom? Who had the correct answer? Jackson, Marcia, Naomi, or Phil? Okay, still getting some answers. So the correct answer on this one is Naomi. Accreditation is not based in state law. All the other aspects require state law. So involuntary commitment, licensure, and privileged communication are all based in law. Accreditation is usually run by an organization that you pay to get some sort of accreditation. Yeah, so it's pretty spread out on that one. All right, the next question is coming up. So a counselor is working in a juvenile group home designed, or excuse me, a counselor working in a juvenile group home designed an inventory of social skills which each resident takes. The purpose of this inventory is to substitute for other ways of estimating social skills for residents. Since the purpose of this inventory is to substitute for other methods of measurement, the most appropriate type of validity we're concerned with are Holly, I miss those days. Oh my gosh, I miss those days. They cuddle. All right, let's think about what's going to be the most appropriate for a substitute. Okay. We're going to go ahead to the answers. So The key word here is substitute. That's the big word right there, is to substitute. And so the first type of validity that was on there was construct validity. And construct validity is whether a test measures what it's supposed to be measuring, right? Construct. Is it measuring intelligence? Is it measuring self-efficacy? What's it measuring? The next one is content. So it's the adequacy that the test measures the content it's supposed to. So remember that matrix I gave at the beginning of this and talked about how it measured the K-CREP domains and it measured the job analysis work areas? Well, that would be a demonstration of content validity. The next one is concurrent validity, measures how well a new test compares to a well-established test. So, that sounds like a substitute, right? It's taking place of a test. And face validity is the degree to which it appears to make sense that it's included. So in this particular one, concurrent would have been the best answer. Okay, so concurrent validity is a good answer for this one. Next one. Antonio is finishing a master's degree in counseling and must complete a thesis. He decides to investigate the difference in social skills between homeless veterans and a sample of veterans who are not homeless. As he gets to the point in data collection, he realizes that it will be limited in assessing only those veterans of each group who volunteer to participate. Because of that, when it comes time for data analysis, Antonio will probably have to use what? What type of statistics or process? All right, let's go ahead and go into the answers. So the key here is that he's going to be limited to those who volunteer. So it's not going to be random sampling. We're not going to have a random sample from which to choose. So let's break down the words. Regression statistics is about predictions. He's not trying to predict anything. Non-parametric statistics are not based on probability distributions. I don't have a random sample, so that might be a good answer. Parametric statistics are based on probability distribution, and factor analysis is used to reduce a large number of items into a smaller grouping of numbers or factors. So in this particular case, non-parametric statistics that are not based on probability or the normal bell-shaped curve, that will be our answer because we have a volunteer sample here. And because we have a volunteer sample, we can't say that our sample approximates the bell-shaped curve. The way I remember this is parametric looks like a parachute and it's P for probability. So parachute looks like a normal bell-shaped curve and probability is a P. So P, there you go. Got parametric, population, that is that. Next one. Counselors set up an elaborate experimental study, which includes gathering pre- and post-test data. However, she's concerned the pre-test itself might influence or interact with the experimental treatment. To deal with this contingency, she decided to use, and it's interesting, this particular item, somebody told me the other day, was on the last NCE because they took it and they were like, oh, I remember that question. So something very similar to this one is on there. This one's a little slower in response, so I'm going to go ahead and go so I can break these down for you. So First up, chi-square. Chi-square is looking at, it's a non-parametric statistic, and it's looking at, I expected these outcomes, but I got these outcomes. Election results are a great example of that. Like, we expected this person to win, but here's what actually happened. Here's the actual results. So you're comparing the expected results with the observed results. The next one is multiple regression, which is about prediction of multiple variables. So this is, I like to call this the crystal ball, where you can use variables to predict the future. My older child did a really great experiment in 10th grade where the teacher had them look at the colleges they were interested in attending, and they had to take the GRE scores, the high school GPAs, and any information they could get from the website from the college, and they put those variables into an equation, and they created a prediction equation for how likely they were to get into that school, which was kind of cool, you know, which quickly demonstrated my child should stop looking at Duke University and move on. So just saying, okay, you know, in that case, it was a great tool that we got to use. Duncan's multiple range test was a post hoc test, which is measured specific differences between pairs and means. Remember, we talked about pairing scores. And so this one is a non-parametric way of looking at pairs of scores. And then the last one is Solomon Foursquare, which controls for the effects of a pretest. Likely to be our answer. So Solomon Foursquare is the answer on this one. Let me give you another example of Solomon Foursquare, because for some reason, Solomon Foursquare shows up on the NCE a lot. So I think there's a writer that really likes the Solomon Foursquare. So I am teaching an NCE Prep course, okay? I have you take a pretest. Then I do the actual course. Then we do a post-test. How do I know you didn't actually learn from the pretest? Right? You can learn from the pretest as much as you can learn from the intervention itself. So what I'm going to do is run a study where I divide you into 4 groups. One group gets the pretest and the intervention, one group gets the post-test, and one gets the pretest and the post-test. One group gets just the intervention and the post-test, one gets just the post-test. So then I'm able to isolate the impact of the pretest by comparing those 4 groups, because everybody's getting different aspects of the study. Then I can see what the effects were actually of the intervention, and I can isolate the effects of the pretest. So that's why we would use a Solomon Foursquare. Next up, we have a special education teacher. And the special education teacher has a child who has considerable difficulty writing words because of physical limitations. Periodically, the teacher reinforces the child with a smile and an encouraging word. This is an example of what type of reinforcement. This is a human development question. So is it variable interview, variable ratio, fixed interval, or fixed ratio? Okay, let's go ahead, and a few people coming in still. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at these and break them down. So we have variable interval, which is a reinforcement that's delivered at unpredictable time intervals. We have variable ratio, which is a reinforcement that's delivered after unpredictable number of responses. So intervals time, ratios number. Fixed interval is reinforcement delivered at predictable time intervals. And ratio is a fixed ratio is reinforcements delivered after a predictable number. So when we think about this periodically, that's kind of occasionally, right? this person is giving this particular person a encouraging smile and a encouraging word. So it would be variable interval. So it's unpredictable time. Periodically, period means time. So that is variable interval. Okay, so I hope this helps break down these guys. Okay, time and whether or not it's consistent or is it just whenever. Next up. So a career assessment information system that replaced the Dictionary of Occupational Titles is developed by the Department of Labor. What is it? This one went pretty quick. This is just a knowledge one. This one you kind of either know or you don't know. And so for those of you who didn't know, it's ONET. ONET is the occupational network, and that is now an online version. When I started out in counseling, we had these books that were like this big that came out every year, the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. And as a vocational counselor, when I was working with somebody, I would have to flip through this book and find a code for that occupational to put on the forms. It was time consuming, not efficient. Now you can just search it, right? I can just go online, boom, tell me about being a counselor and what's the job outlook for that job in a state or whatnot. It's really good. Okay, very easy. So much easier than what we used to have in the old days. All right, so this one. A term which refers to communication through the use of microspace, that is the distance, I guess it's 6 feet now, right? That we maintain between each other. Okay, this one went pretty fast. And I always think of it as proximity, right? It's the space between us, so proximity. So it's proxemics. Sorry, I skipped the answer. That one was proxemics. Next question. When any culture makes an effort to become a part, I think that's supposed to be client. When any client makes an effort to become a part of a larger culture, the process is known as, so we have a client from a different culture. They're trying to become part of another culture, a larger culture. What is it called? This is not Star Trek, so. So it is going to be, there we go, acculturation. No, assimilation. Should be acculturation too. So acculturation or assimilation. Okay, we got a couple more questions and we'll be done with this one. Which of the following career theorists advocates individual differences in backgrounds, physical and psychological variables, and accumulated experiences? This one's going fast. You guys know your career theories. That's great. This is a big part of the test. It's interesting because for a lot of people, it's one class, but this is a big part of the test. So I definitely recommend you go back and review your career notes. kind of like your other theories, it's really important to have kind of an outline of what's Super say, what's Holland say, what's Rose say, what, you know, having those theories outlined is going to be really important and a good way to study. The actual answer is Ann Rowe. So Ann Rowe is the actual, so when you think of super, think about the rainbow. Like we have all these options, right? We have like at the end of our development, we can find our answer to our question, but Ann Rowe thinks about our parents having an influence, our environment having an influence, the characteristics we bring to the career process. And then our last question is several authors, Super, Livingston, Erickson, suggest that clients are vulnerable at certain times, and during these times, counselors are needed more than ever. A term that refers to this point in time is, which one? So you hear this a lot in human growth and development. Okay. All right, kind of stalled out, so let's end the question. So the answer is transition. Looks like a lot of people got that one. Good job. You guys have done well. Transition. All right, and I think that is it for this particular section. So let's see who our top scorers were. Aaron, followed by Monet and Kay. Congratulations, good job. All right, so you should be able to get your report and it'll tell you kind of how you did, what you need to practice, and you can go back and replay it, okay? And you can practice it some more. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a second and check in. How's everybody doing? How are you feeling? Is it helpful? Does that breaking down the questions help some? I know it's a lot and your brain is gonna feel really tired at the end of the day. Okay.
Lorianne, I have a quick question.
Sure.
I have actually a technical question from the test. I wonder if, like when you take the test and let's say that you don't know at all the answer, is it better to guess it? Yes. Or to not answer?
Yes.
How does it work?
Yeah, I would definitely guess without a doubt. And what I would recommend is break it down. Like there's going to be two answers that you should be able to eliminate pretty quickly. Okay, there's two answers that are going to be wrong. And then you got a 50-50 decision, right? You can make a decision. What I tell people is maybe rank order the letters in the order that you want to use them. Is, and just so you know, NBCC makes sure there's about an equal number of answers for each letter. So, but you know, like if I don't know and one of my two answers has got a C in it, I'm always going to choose C first, then a B, then an A, then a D, right? So I'm always going to break it down to those two, and I'm going to just have a letter that I'm going to consistently choose if I totally don't know, you know, because statistically, chances are if I keep guessing the same letter, at some point I'm going to get the right answer. If I keep changing the one I guess, then it's chances are I'm not going to get it right. Okay, so just use statistics to your advantage. Try to eliminate at least two and get it down to a 50-50, and then that will help your chances. Okay, but better to guess. Do not leave it blank. You are not helping yourself at all if you leave it blank. Okay. And, you know, Erica, I just want to say that use that cheat sheet for that, you know, those couple of cheat sheet slides that I gave you about the number of independent variables and dependent variables. If you can really get that down, it will help you break down those stats questions. Okay. And finding the keyword definitely helps. And remember, that's one of the smaller parts of the test. So keep it in perspective. Okay. All right, so next up is our social cultural Kahoot. So that's what we're gonna do next. So we'll go back to Kahoot, get back in there and I'll get it pulled up and then I'll share my screen. And then we're gonna work on ethics after that, and then we should be at lunch. We may not even get to that. We may have to do ethics. We'll see. Here we go. Let's pull it up. Let me share my screen. All right, so our pen, as soon as I get it coming up. Okay, so the pin for our social cultural is going to be 172-6158. 172-6158.
Dr. LA, there was a question about if we could read the questions ourselves rather than reading them out loud.
I am happy to do that. It seems like every group is different. Some want me to read them, some don't. So. Trust me, it's better on my voice if I don't. So I'm good at that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start. If you are not in, you can join during the game. So let's go ahead and get started. Good job. Everybody got that one. Excellent. Crafty's in the lead. Good job. Most of you got that one. So ally is the person who works. None of these other ones are a person. So the other ones, you know, it says someone who. So that's a role of that person who is working in that. Okay, and our B is in the lead. Okay, good job. Most of you got a bias. So that is that one. Ooh, JMS has moved into the lead. All right, a little bit of a split here. Cultural humility is that ongoing lifelong process that we go where we reflect about ourselves and how we're interacting with others and how our culture interacts with others. So that's cultural humility. Important to know. Cultural competence is kind of more of an older concept where it's like, oh, I can learn about other cultures and I'm done. I'm good. Which is not true. That's not how culture works. It's an ongoing process, right? So it's something that we need both. We need to learn about other groups and we need to reflect on how our beliefs intersect with other people's beliefs and what impact that has, positive or negative. Okay, keeping shuffling up. We have via me. Good job. Most everybody got that one. Well done. Well, we're just like all sorts of shuffling on these leaderboard this time. Discrimination. I just want to distinguish. Sometimes people use prejudice and discrimination interchangeably. Prejudice is the belief, the bias, and discrimination is the action, the treatment of. So make sure you can distinguish between the two. Okay, so the idea that we have all of these different layers of who we are. You know, I'm a parental ally of a trans child. I am a woman. I am Native American. I am, you know, like all of these things make up who I am. I'm a military spouse. I live in the South. Like all of these different aspects make up who I am and are part of my intersectionality. It brings all those pieces together for me. And some of those cause me to be treated differently than others. Okay, marginalization. Yes, that's the part where we're putting people into categories or separating them in some way. So you can see from this, a lot of this is about terms, just knowing your terms and being able to differentiate your terms. Besides the apps, which I think are a great tool for practicing, I'm an old school person, flashcards, using something like Quizlet. If you're not familiar with Quizlet, Quizlet's a great tool. You can set up list of terms and practice with flashcards and matching games and all sorts of things. It's a great tool to help you with it. Because if you know the terms, you can figure out what they want in the answer. Good job. Oppression. It's what we do to other people. It's like when you get your head pushed underwater and you can't breathe. Basically, yes, oppression. I've been in some pretty oppressive systems as a woman. I actually used to work at the House of Representatives. I assure you, it was very oppressive towards women. It's not a fun place to be. It was good to work there and learn a lot, but the systems were a little suffocating. Wow, that one's quick. Good job. Bam, nailed that one. A little bit of a split here. Okay. So, you know, when we talk about social justice, we're talking about equity. We're talking about the ability to get the resources you need. I was actually part of a conversation the other day that just about, like, I'm surprised I don't have a bruise in my forehead because I really was banging my head figuratively during the meeting, because a white heterosexual male was talking about how he didn't understand why everybody was complaining that he had never had any obstacles or challenges in his career and everybody just needed to work hard. Okay. Yeah, that's how I felt, Yoli. Same thing, same face. Yep, exact. So, you know, it's like there was a complete disregard for the challenges that other people have and where they start or don't start from. It's assuming that everybody's starting from the same starting line, which is absolutely not true. It's just not. And so social justice is about making sure that everybody has the resources they need to be able to get where they need to go and to be able to show their abilities and their aptitude and be able to achieve whatever they need to achieve. So that's social justice. That's what we're fighting for. Well done. Stereotypes. I mean, some of you may have had the same experience, but when I went through multicultural counseling and as a master's student eons ago, our textbook was set up like, oh, this is Native American week. Oh, this is African American week. Oh, this is, you know, and that's, we're trying to move away from that as a program because that reinforces the stereotypes, right? Because I'm Native American, my grandmother's Native American, and I assure you I look different and have different traditions and beliefs than other Native Americans in the country, right? So you can't group us all together and say we're all the same. We're not, right? We're just not. We have different experiences, we have different historical traumas, there's all sorts of things that happen. So you have to treat each individual and meet them where they are. And it also, stereotypes also discount intersectionality, right? The layers that we have and the importance of those layers. Yes, cultural encapsulation. I'm saying that you're in my culture, you need to do it the way I do it, right? And that's like not the case. You need to recognize that different people have different ways, and we need to check in with our clients about what's going on and what works for them and what they're comfortable with, and not assume we know what is going to work for them and what they're doing, what it means. Okay, kinesthetics, actions, movement. E. Elizabeth is in the lead. Go ahead, next. There we go. I do recommend you know Sue and Sue. That's definitely a multicultural theory you need to be familiar with. Focus of responsibility. Shuffling around. I once had a student tell me they were an atheist, so they didn't need to learn about religions. And I have to remind you that you have to meet your client where your client is. So you need to understand the basics of different religions so that you can understand kind of where they're coming from. You don't have to understand completely. You can also seek out knowledge from them, but you do need to have some awareness of multiple religions. Yes, middle class. Socioeconomics comes up. You know, what's the characteristics of these classes? Ethnocentrism, good job. This is what my dissertation was on. What makes for resiliency and success in college? Good job. Keep seeing these typos. You gotta fix these typos. See typos. Let's see. Easy is in the lead. You'll see an activity we do later today that just knowing the common names of theorists is important. So just making different, you know, like identity development, sexual identity development, your different theories. Make sure you know the key theorists who are associated with each one of those. Yes. Thanks to many policies. Asian Americans. I would differentiate this. I would say that for Latin Americans, it's more collectivistic, more of a familial, like a commitment to family first, whereas filial piety is you defer to the family, which is a little bit different. So just know, you know, it's more with Latin Americans, it's more of making a decision as a family and collectivist and, you know, having great respect for ancestors. But with Asian Americans, it's, as a stereotype, it's more about deferring to family for decisions. Okay, good job. Honeymoon, that one's spread out a little bit. So just knowing the stages of acculturation and what that process is like for individuals. Okay, just a few more in this section. Now, the good news is most of your questions now are not going to have knots in them. So you're not, they're moving away from those types of questions because they can be pretty confusing. So there'll be a movement away from that. Good job. Knowing your developmental stages and the characteristics and what you're usually dealing with during those phases is a good thing to study as well. So understanding what the key events, activities, accomplishments should be in those times. Okay. We have what? One more? This is the last one for social culture. Credibility. If you don't have credibility, you can't have influence, right? If say people don't believe that if you know what you're talking about, you're not going to be able to make any type of influence. All right, let's see who our leaders are. I'll show you where to go to get our next activity. All right, so in that Dropbox, there is an ethics game, and that is what I need you to check on. You need to pull that up because you will need that ethics game for our next activity. Okay, there you go. So the goal of the ethics game is that I'm going to put you in breakout rooms, and in the breakout rooms, I want you to use the ACA code of ethics or the NBCC code of ethics. I think it would be good if, you know, I'm going to put you in groups of 4 or 5. So if a couple of people could have the NBCC code and a couple of people could have the ACA code, that would probably be the best way to do it. Work smarter, not harder. And another hint is if you pull the ACA code of ethics up or the NBCC code of ethics up electronically, you can do Control F on a PC or Command F on a Mac, and you can search for key terms, and that makes it even faster. Your goal is to identify if the statement is true or false and what ethical standard supports that true or false. Okay, because you will get tested on the codes of ethics, and remember that you get tested on both ACA and the NBCC code. So the ACA code I actually have in that resource for you. I'm not sure if the NBCC one's in there, so let's do this. NBCC code of ethics. I think it was in there. I just want to make sure that you guys have it. It's right here. Very super easy to find. I'll pull that up and I'll put that one in the chat as well. Okay, so if you have that one. So the second link is for the NBCC code of ethics, which you will be tested on this test. All right, so again, go to the Dropbox folder to pull up the ethics quiz. It's here, true or false. The only one that's not true or false is 27. Ask you what the fundamental principles of counseling are. So you have that piece to put in as well. All right, so I'm going to break you up into groups of 4 to 5. Does anybody have any questions about the activity before we get started? The sheet in your packet too. It's actually in there. I'm working from it right now, so I'll make sure it's totally updated. Oh, so I can see you. Okay, all right. So first one, counselors should devise a counseling plan and review the plan frequently with their client. True or false? What do y'all think? Thumbs up, yes. Thumbs no down, yes. Good job. Okay, so that's in both the ACA and the NBCC. And you may have a different standard than I do, and that's okay. This is just the standard that I identified. So it doesn't mean it's the only standard that might cover it. Counselors may help a client with an unfamiliar issue as long as the counselor intends on receiving training. Yeah. Definitely. Thumbs down, right? You need to have competency to be able to provide services. Okay. Counselors may date a former client as long as the relationship is mutual. You won't believe this. Well, you might believe this, but when I was on the licensure board, we met every quarter. So 4 times a year. And every single meeting, we had multiple complaints about dual relationships, many of them sexual, with clients. It was like a chronic issue. So this is something that happens all the time. One case I think is kind of funny. So counselor, no, how did it work? Client went to see counselor, female counselor, male client. Counselor and client talked for a bit. Counselor refunded the client the money for the session, and they went out on a lunch date afterwards. And then they wrote a novel about their affair, and the ex-wife sent the book to all the board members in North Carolina. That was my first board meeting. That was my first one. So, yeah, this stuff happens. All right.
They had too much time.
What's the name of the book?
I know, I don't even remember at this point. But I do remember, I mean, I was a new board member and I got this book in the mail and I was like, why did I get this book? And we got an email from the board administrator going, you may have received a book in the mail today, and here's the story. So that's what that was. Okay, so don't date your clients. I mean, NBCC says after 2 years. I will be honest, I disagree with that. I don't think you should ever date clients or former clients, family members, because you don't know when they might come back to ask for services. Or I'm saying, like, yeah, 2 years according to NBCC, 5 by ACA. A lot of other places say don't do it, and I'm kind of in the don't do it category. So yeah, ACA says 5, NBCC says 2. Not a good idea. Just avoid it. All right. So counselors must help enforce the code of ethics. Yes, we are responsible. So if we see something unethical happening, we need to speak up. We need to talk about it. We need to address it. And if we can't, then we file a complaint. If a client, go ahead.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Back to the one. So if there's an NCE question,
Then I would go with the 2 year because it's an NCE question. I suspect they will say, according to the NBCC, how many years should you wait before you date a client? Or they'll say, according to ACA. So just know there's a difference.
okay.
Good question, Jerry. If a client cannot pay for services, a counselor may barter with the client. Up, down, what do y'all think? Oh, we got a mix. Yes, you may. You can actually barter with clients. The key is making sure it's equitable value, which should be evaluated somebody external of the relationship. Okay, so that's not, I'd rather do pro bono than barter, but you can barter. Some clients just don't want to be seen for free. I had a situation with a client who lost their job and wanted to continue counseling, but was not willing to do pro bono services because, I mean, I think pride, but I get it. And so he was a painter. So I had him paint a room. And we agreed on the value of what would you charge a client. He paints the room. I give him X number of sessions. I didn't really need the room painted. I didn't evaluate the painting. It was just, more that I think really it was a therapeutic intervention for him. He needed to be working. He needed to feel, a sense of he was being, contributing to what was going on. A referral is complete when the counselor provides the client with a list of referrals. Thumbs up, thumbs down. What do y'all think? Another mix. Actually, it is not. You need to follow up and make sure they understand the referral. You need to, or false, sorry. Yeah, false. It's not complete. So you need to not only just give them a list, but you should follow up with them and say, did you have any problems? Do you need more names? How is it going? You need to kind of make sure that they are able to make that connection. Now, if they say, I haven't had time, I haven't gotten to it, then you just document that. You just document that you did the follow-up and it's okay. Counselors must screen prospective group members, yay or nay? Definitely a yay, yes, absolutely. Interestingly though, I couldn't find anything in NBCC that said anything about that, just ACA. So you'll see there's some things covered in some ethics, but not in the others. Counselors should submit articles to several journals at one time to ensure publication. Very good, Yoli, yes. Definitely a no, because of copyright law. If both of them accept it, they both own it. Then we have a copyright law infringement, right? So that is a big no-no, only one at a time. When providing counseling to 2 or more people in an established relationship, you need to clarify who's the counselor and the nature of the counseling relationship, A or nay. Okay, good job. So we definitely need to do that. So if I'm working with a couple, the couple is the client, right? If I'm working with a family and there's an identified client, then, or is it the whole family? I have to make that noted in the file. When speaking in public, counselors must clarify they are speaking personally. True or false? Yes. Remember at the beginning of the session, I said I'm not representing any organization. I had them listed. That was my ethical duty to do that. I needed to state that. If you work for a mental health agency, you may see a client as private pay if the client agrees, yay or nay. Oh, yeah, this one's false. But now, if your agency is does not provide a service, okay, so like I'm a dialectical behavioral therapist, and when I worked at Meredith College, which I loved working there, yay Heidi. When I worked at Meredith for a very long time, I was a DBT therapist, but Meredith itself did not provide dialectical behavioral therapy. Okay, so I provided that service in my private practice. So I was able, with Beth Meyer, the coordinator's, director's agreement, I was allowed to be on the referral list for DBT therapists, but I couldn't be the only person they were referring to. I had to be one of several, right? And that was appropriate then. They can't be forced to get services over here that they pay for that they don't have to pay for over here. Okay. All right. A counselor who disagrees with their supervisor or agency policies must work out the difference or quit. True or false? This is surprising, guys. This is true. This one is true. Yeah, if you stay and you disagree with the policies, you're saying, I agree. So if you disagree, you have to leave. It's a values conflict. Counselors must assist in arranging for the continuation of clients following the termination of counseling. True or false? True. Yeah, this one's true. So if they're not going to continue with me, or like when I switched my whole practice over to telehealth, and if a client didn't want to engage in telehealth or wasn't an appropriate option for telehealth, then I had to help them find other resources and services. That was my goal, okay, my objective. Counselors must inform clients when the client is involved in research. I hope everybody got this one. Yes, informed consent. This one we have to do for sure. Counselors may confirm appointments for clients on phone numbers and emails given by the client during intake. This is usually a mix, but okay, all right. It's going to be surprising. It's false. The client is not consenting to the use of those emails and phone numbers for anything on the intake form. You actually have to get actual consent from them that you may leave a message with that information or confirm appointments, because you don't know who's on the other end of that phone call. You don't know who's getting those texts or who's getting those emails. So you've got to have actual direct consent to use it for that. Sometimes you'll see on intakes, it'll say, can we use this number for the purpose of communication? If that's checked, yes, you can do it, but it has to be a statement on the intake form that allows specifically for the relaying of information. Use of computers and emails are strictly prohibited in counseling. False, I uncovered it too soon. Now, interesting thing, I started counseling in 1992, and this was true in 1992. They strongly discouraged the use of computers at that time because they weren't secure. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have any sense. And then we went to, you can use them, but you better be careful, to, you can use them, but you better get some training. So now we have a whole section that I helped write, section H of the code, that says you can do it and here's how to do it right. Okay, so we've been through those phases over time using technology. Counselors must always include parents when counseling minors. Yay, nay, maybe. Ooh, yeah, that's a mix. So it is false because we don't always have to include them, okay? But you do know, if you're in the state with different state laws, you do need to know your state laws of who's a minor, who's not. Here's an interesting little tidbit, won't be on NCE, but just a little tidbit. In Tennessee, for example, if you engage with somebody under the age of 16 through telehealth, you must have a parent present in the room, right? So different states have different laws, okay? And you need to know what those laws are. Quick little tip on that, especially with telehealth, the Center for Connected Health Policy. The Center for Connected Health Policy is an amazing resource that has a bunch of has all the laws listed about telehealth to help you with that, including minor rules. So does Epstein Becker Green, which is a lobby firm. They have a mental health app that you can download that will tell you the laws of your state and what requirements are. So mental health app, telehealth, telemental health app. Counselors may use PhD in advertising as long as the doctorate is in counseling. True or false? Yes, true. Yep. As long as it's in counseling. If I have a PhD in history, I cannot use that for the purpose of advertising, right? I can't mislead people to think that my PhD is in counseling. I have to be clear about that. Sherry, we'll come back to your question. Counselors may use any testing materials found online. True or false? What do y'all think? Yes, Shirley, good job. False, false.
I've got a question about the PhD. Out of curiosity, what if the PhD is in a related field like psychology or something like that?
Yeah, as long as it's in a mental health field, a
Okay.
clinical degree, then you're okay. But it needs to be a clinical degree if you're advertising for clinical services. And I think if you're like, if I was an LPC and I had a PhD in psychology, I probably would say that. I would probably say PhD in psychology, comma, LPC, right?
I
I'd
see.
probably be clear about that. And the reason we can't use any testing materials online is there's some scary assessments out there that are not validated and reliable. So we want to make sure we're using valid and reliable instruments. There's some good instruments out there online, even free ones that are available. Counselors need to create a plan of transfer for clients and records to an appropriate colleague in the event of the counselor's death. Yes, absolutely. So I actually have an executor who is, I have in my will, the executor of my private practice is Dr. Andy Brown, right? It's written in my will, so there's no question about it. Counselors provide distance counseling may be subject to the laws and regulations of both where the counselor is located and the client's place of residence. True or false? True, yes. So in North Carolina in particular, it's a double state. So I have to be licensed where I am, and I have to be licensed where my client lives. So even though I moved to Virginia and I had a North Carolina license, I couldn't continue giving services to my North Carolina clients because I didn't have a Virginia license. I had to get my Virginia license and my North Carolina license to be able to provide services in North Carolina.
So Lori, and how's that different now with the pandemic because of?
And that's where the Center for Connected Health Policy comes in handy, because the Center for Connected Health Policy actually has a tab at the top that says COVID-related waivers, laws, things like that. And you can click on that and it tells you the different waivers and laws, like a 30-day exception in the state of emergency. In some states, if the governor has declared a state of emergency, like in New York when they did for the COVID, then we were allowed to practice in New York without a license to provide additional support and services.
Yeah, because one of my clients is in Texas. Ironically, she's in Texas. She went for the holiday and she's still there. And so I contacted Texas and they gave me their website and said, you know, here's the information.
Yeah.
And then somebody was saying that it's become even more global because of the pandemic.
It has for some professions, counseling not so much. So psychologists have the interstate compact, nurses have an interstate compact. It's something we're working towards, but it's not perfect yet. I really do recommend using the Center for Connected Health Policy. It's an amazing resource.
Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And I have a similar question where what if you owned a private practice and you wanted to travel or go on vacation, say overseas?
So I had a situation where one time I was teaching a residency in California, and my client reached out to me and said, you know, I'm thinking about killing myself and the kids. Yeah, problem, right? So that in that situation, legally, I should not have provided services. Okay, now, ethically, ethical decision making, what am I going to do? I'm going to help my client, right? It's like I've got to get services. Now, this is where it's really important to already know your emergency services really well. Because in North Carolina, to commit somebody, I'm supposed to walk down to the magistrate's office, fill out the paperwork, stand in front of the magistrate, attest to the fact that my client needs to be committed. The magistrate's going to have a bit of a hearing, make a decision, and then send the police off to get my client. Okay, I'm in California. I'm in Anaheim, California. I can't do that in a reasonable amount of time with my client actively in a bad situation. Now, fortunately, I knew the sheriff. I called the sheriff at home and said, hey, I'm in California. I need your help. Here's the deal. And because I had a pre-existing relationship in that situation, they did the work. They did a well check and they did the work, right, for me. But if I hadn't had that pre-existing relationship, it might have been much harder to help my client when I was that far away. right? So you have to think about these things and build those relationships before you need them. Counselors may accept clients as friends on their Facebook as long as the boundaries are clearly articulated. I hope you all say no to this one. Okay, thank you. All right, so it was really interesting though, in the time that I served on the LPC board from 2006 to 2012-13, we moved from having dual relationships being our #1 complaint to social media being our #1 complaint in 6 short years. And so this is not something that's unusual. One of the first cases we had was somebody confirming appointments through a Facebook page on her wall. Okay? Yeah. So it does happen. So just, know that you need to make the decisions there. When providing distance counseling, the counselor must verify the client's identity. True or false? Yes, Kyle, good, Jess. Yes, yes, yes. And that is not an event. That is a process. So that means it happens every time, right? Your client texts you. Do you just assume that's your client? Because guess what? There are apps out there where if I have Kyla's phone number, I can text Cindy and Cindy will think it's from Kyla, but it's not. And I've never had possession of Kyla's phone. So, you have to understand the risks that are out there. So you can't assume an email or a text message is from somebody unless you verify their identity. How do you do that? Code names, code words, using encrypted systems that you have to sign in using a password. Okay, those are the ways that we do that. Counselors may refer a terminally ill client who wishes to explore end of life on the basis of the personal value. So this is saying that if I believe that you should not die, that I can base that decision on my values. Yes or no? Exactly, Kyla. No, no, no. So we need to support our clients in their belief system, and we may not agree. But here's the discrepancy, right? But I'm also told I'm supposed to help somebody who is suicidal. How do I do this, right? And ultimately, some of the literature that's come out is, well, you got to make a decision. Is it end of life or is it suicide? Which one is it? And they're clarifying and classifying them differently. Okay. All right. Then I don't really know what that note says, but a violation of the ACA Code of Ethics is both ethical and legal violation. True or false? False. But if you're taking the NCE test, or not the NCE, if you're taking the NC jurisprudence exam, it is true. So on a national exam, it's false. On a state exam, it could be true. Because in North Carolina, the Code of Ethics is also law. It's actually been codified, okay? So you have to know in your state, is ACA code part of the counseling law? If it's named in the counseling law, then it's codified and it's become law. But nationally, we say no. It's ethics, okay, which are different. Counselors may refer clients when the client's lifestyle contradicts the counselor's religious beliefs. Christina, no, it's going to be a false. This one is a false. So, and this is again a state-by-state thing. Different states have different rules. Mississippi, Tennessee, I think Alabama too, right? Like they have where you can do some referrals based on religious beliefs. So that, but on a national test, the answer is no. Okay, on the national test, the answer is no. And then I just wanted you to have these so that you would know, because they do ask a lot of questions about these concepts in the test. So I want you to be familiar with those, so you're familiar with those terms and what they mean. So when you're asked, you'll know what to do. Questions? Sherry asked a question about encryption of a document. Sherry, can you come on and tell me kind of exactly what, because I could talk about that for an hour.
Yeah, great. We were talking in our group about, the two-lock system, having your records behind the door in a locked cabinet. And
Same
then
principle electronically.
I'm sorry?
It's the same principle electronically. Your computer should have a password, and the document should, or the way that you get to the document should have a password.
Okay, so I guess I need to learn more about how to do that. So that, if I'm, is the use of a Google Doc, like that's not really secure, right? So.
Right. you have to have Google Suite, which is the business level version, because then you have to have a password to get into that, to get to the document. That's like your second lock, right? Your first lock is the lock on your computer. Like when you log in, you shouldn't be able to just open up your computer and access anything on there. You need to have to open your computer, which is why I couldn't get in after break. Like it locked me out and would not let me, it would not accept my password, right? So that is the first lock. The second lock is the password signing into the electronic portal, the electronic health records, signing into the DocuSign, whatever it is, you need to have that encrypted and secure. You know, the other thing, I mean, just some common sense things, but just to say, you know, don't use passwords that are something that somebody could guess. Don't use passwords that are real words, you know, incorporate some sense of symbols and when you're doing encryption. In, what is it, 256 now is the standard. It used to be 128, but now 256 encryption is now the standard. So you'll see that on anything that's encrypted, it'll say encrypted with this type of key, and you need a 256 key for encryption. Telehealth, I could talk to you all day long. That's a whole nother webinar. Okay. All right. Any questions about ethics? My suggestion is the day before you take the test is to go, well, we can't really do this as much as we used to be able to, but my old advice was go get a massage. Go get your nails done. Go for a walk in Umstead Park. Or, you know, like do something great for self-care the day before your test. Do not cram, do not study, do not do. The only thing that I would recommend you do before the exam, the day before, is read through the NBCC Code of Ethics and read through the ACA Code of Ethics. That's the only thing I would suggest you do the day before. Okay, otherwise you really need to do something nice to clear your head, whatever that might be for you. If it's binge watching Netflix, if it's going for a walk, I don't care what it is, but do something kind and support it. Don't try to work a full day ahead of the test. You know, really take a day off, like do something nice for yourself. You're going to be in a much better position, and drink lots of water. Drink lots of water. All right, so I think that's it for ethics. Let's kind of hit all the highlights and had you go through that process. So let's go to our next, I think we have Kahoot. Yes, our next Kahoot is a fun Kahoot. So our next Kahoot is a little bit different than our other Kahoots. So in this Kahoot, what you're gonna do is you're going to get a statement or no, actually it's gonna be, I'm trying to say, okay. It's going to be 4 theories that show up on the screen, or 4 theoretical concepts that show up on the screen. 3 of them will be from the same theory. 1 of them will not be. So it's kind of like which one doesn't belong. All right. So your job is to look at the 4 items and figure out which one is not related to the same theory. Okay. So let's go into that Kahoot. Here we go. And somebody asked if the Kahoots will be available. Yes, if you've played them and you were logged in, you will have access to on your Kahoots. And Holly, I think, pointed out that there's a flashcard version that you can play as well. The other thing I'll do is I can set this up for what's called teach mode for 2 weeks, and I can give you links to the Kahoots and you can play them for the next 2 weeks too. But if you've done it through your app, you should be able to play it. This Kahoot pin is 425 5499. 425 5499. All right, people coming in. Batman. I'm so glad Batman could join us today. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. If you're still trying to join us, the pin is 425-5499, and you'll be able to join after the game starts. So which one doesn't fit? What doesn't belong? And I've been told to stop reading, so I'm just gonna let y'all read them. Good job. So this one is different than these. All of these are developmental. They're also Erickson. You can, pull these. So all of these belong to the same process. So fictional finalism, basic mistakes, and social interest, all Adlerian for one. So that will be something to think about. Power analysis, that's usually under feminist. Shuffle, shuffle. Role reversal. The rest of these are all behavioral. All behavioral. Systematic desensitization being developed by Wolpe. So problem-saturated stories tends to be narrative, right? And the rest of these tend to be solution-focused. Holly holding on to the lead there. Object relations being Jung, Freud, right? The psychoanalytic, and the rest of these being family. Holly's still holding on to the lead. And the answer is cognitive restructuring, which is CBT. The rest of these are Gestalt. A little bit of shuffle. Style of life is Adlerian. The rest of these are person-centered. Behavioral modification, behavioral. The rest of these are Adlerian. Ooh, Sheets is on fire. Good job. So social action, that can be actually a couple of different ones, but feminism in particular. The other ones of these are psychoanalytic, but I did want to go over the ego defenses and just say that you want to know what the definition of those are. So make sure you make a list of what the ego defenses are. So that's denial, repression, projection, displacement, regression, sublimation, rationalizations. You can just Google ego defense mechanisms and you'll get a list. All right, because those are ones that you will probably see a couple of questions related to those. Like a client is doing this. Which one of the following is it? And you have to choose which ego defense it is. So that's a common question to see. A little bit more shuffling. So striving for superiority tends to be more Adlerian, where these others tend to be more existential. Okay, like wanting, you know, I'm aware that I'm going to die. I'm seeking to understand myself. She's holding on to the lead. Okay, Rollo May is going to be the outsider. The rest of these are cognitive behavioral. Okay. She's holding on to the lead. So we had CBT and existential in that last one. So early recollections is going to be Adlerian. The rest of these will be family. Oh, Adriana's taking the lead. So Albert Ellis is going to be CBT. The rest of these are considered postmodern. So narrative, solution brief focus, things like that. So Michael Dwight unfortunately died way too young and was a great founder of narrative therapy. Sheets is back in the lead. Man. So lifestyle assessment is Adlerian. The rest of these are family. Well, Adriana back in the lead. Lots of shuffling. So the rest of these tends to be like WDP or reality therapy. And then this one, of course, is Rogers. John is staying in the lead. So I need the answers in this one. So the rest of those are actually choice theory, which is Glasser. So William Glasser, and this confronting irrational beliefs is CBT. So feminist is postmodern. The rest of these are humanistic. So they're considered humanistic. I like that little shuffle you do, Rashida. Okay, the ones that are not marked are cognitive behavioral, and the one that is marked is Anna Freud. So psychoanalytic. All right, good job. Miracle question is solution focused, and the rest of these are person centered. Okay, so exception question is solution focused. The rest of these can be behavioral or CBT actually. Those are kind of vacillate. All right, so meta frameworks is on the outside. The rest of these are narrative. Good job. So all of these can be used in CBT, and Gestalt would use empty chair. So Arnold Lazarus created multimodal therapy, and the rest of these are related to family. These two guys had a big fight with each other. These two theorists did not like each other very much. So early recollections is Adler, and then the rest are Freud. So gender role interventions, feminism, and the others could also be family. The others are positive, thinking positive unconditional regard as person-centered, which is Rogers. I don't know how many of you know the history, but you know, you could have something like a question that said, when this theorist came out with their idea that clients should understand the counseling process, they were ostracized, basically, right? And you might wonder who that is, okay? And in this case, it would be Rogers. Rogers had a really hard time when he came out with his theory. When he published some of his articles and things, it was not popular. People thought he was giving away the secrets of psychology. He was taking the power away from the, you know, the therapist. So it was a very controversial period in time. So understanding that history makes it all that more amazing that his theory survived in the way that it did and thrived. So very cool stuff. So totalizing descriptions, program saturated, and dominant story, all are narrative, paradoxical, directive, CBT. The ones that are not selected are not narrative, solution focused, and then DBT is a CBT. So dialectical behavioral therapy is a cognitive behavioral therapy. Got a firm leadership now. This is one of my other favorite theorists. I'm a sand play therapist too. This is the foundation of sand play therapy. So narratives, narrative therapy. The rest of these are from Carl Jung. So Jungian theory, psychoanalytic. So the ones that are not highlighted are reality therapy. Just a reminder, WDEP, what does that stand for? Wants, doing, evaluation, and planning. So wants, doing, evaluation, and planning. So knowing that acronym is, it's related to reality therapy. Transference is psychoanalytic. So all of the ones that are not highlighted are family systems. Collaborative empiricism is a CBT technique. It's a technique of cognitive behavioral therapy. So the other ones that are not highlighted are psychoanalytic, and choice theory is by Dr. Glasser, who was just an amazing man. He was awesome. He was like the grandfather of counseling. We'd all follow him around at ACA. We just like to be in his presence. It was kind of like he had his own little groupies that followed him around ACA all the time. He was such a sweet, just caring. It was like almost like story time in the exhibition hall sometimes. Like you'd see this group of counselors sitting on the floor around Dr. Glasser as he tells stories and things like that during the conference. It was amazing. Miss him terribly. So choice theory, of course, is Dr. Glasser's theory. And then you have empowerment, power analysis, and social action, which are with feminist theory. Just a few more. So multimodal therapy actually borrows from all other therapies. So they don't technically have techniques of their own. So they use this eclectic approach to borrowing techniques from other theories. And then cognitive behavioral, of course, being CBT based. Okay, so the rest of these are behavioral, and this is feminist theory. A little bit of shuffling. All right, so flooding is, remember, one of our very first questions in our practice. So that's behavioral, and the rest of these are narrative. Adriana has a heck of a lead. So, all right, let's see. Okay, so externalization is narrative. The rest of these are CBT. Two more. All right, so dream interpretation, that is Jung and Freud, and then homework, shame, and irrational belief. And this is dream interpretation is really more Jung than Freud. Homework, shame attacking, and irrational beliefs is all CBT. Last one. All right, the ones that are not shaded are existential, and the last one is looking for narrative usually. Okay, so why do we do the, oh, let's do our podium first. We do podium. Third place, money. Second place, Sheets. In first place, I believe, is Adriana. She had quite the lead. Yes, good job. Fourth and fifth is Blake and KW. Congratulations. Woo-hoo. All right, so why do we do that? That's a lengthy exercise. Why is that so important? If you can recognize keywords up in the prompt, you'll be able to match it to other words that are like it, right? So the key is, you know, if I had seen antecedents and consequences and solutions, behavioral, 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 and I'm looking for a behavioral response. A very well-written question is a question that you can cover up the answers and you can guess what the answer is without even looking at the answers, right? So when you're practicing, taking your practice test, that's what I want you to do. I want you to cover up the answers. I want you to look at the prompt, and I want you to try to figure out from the keywords what are some potential answers, and then see if you can have an answer there, something that's similar to that. That's going to help you a lot on the test, as if you're practicing in that way. All right. Yes, it is very similar, Erin, in the style of questions. Very, very similar. In fact, some people say that my prep course questions make the test easy. I don't know. We'll have to see, because they're like, my questions are harder than their questions. But hopefully that'll be the case. All right. So next up, I think we have our theories game. Oh, group counseling. We got to do group counseling, Kahoot, and then we'll do our theories game. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start the game. If you're not in and want to join us, you can certainly do that as the game's going on. So this is going to be focused on group counseling. Okay, so the answer is all the options are true. And as I mentioned, they're trying to phase out of that type of question style in the test and moving to just 4 types of answers. So, but this one is all true. Somebody's just a square. So Holly's in the lead. Okay, so task group. Most of you got that one. I like the part where it's talking about their enlightened values. Do I know therapists who are like that? That is not what we recommend. Not at all. Okay. Holly's maintaining the lead. And again, this is another example of a type of question they're moving away from, the accept question. So here we go. Okay. Ooh, MRB moved into the lead. Okay. If anybody has any questions about these, ask me. They're kind of straightforward, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. Good job. Almost everybody got that one. Basically, we always have to protect client safety and security. Okay, good job. You guys are doing pretty well with these. Good job. Square is in the lead. Not really sure why all the choices is getting scrambled, but it is. Need to go through and fix these and take all those all aboves out. Hold on. I think we can clearly say group is a strength for most people. So make sure you're familiar with the ASGW acronym. That's our group association. So be sure you're familiar with that one. This is another example of a type of question they're trying to move away from, the fill in the blank, but I still see them or hear that they're on the test still right now. Good. Glad not too many people chose, or nobody chose the personality disordered one. That's kind of that distinct right or wrong group. Amy is in the lead. Good. Yep. It's the same thing with resistance. So, you know, resistance isn't necessarily a bad thing. And sometimes it's used with a negative connotation, but resistance can be a positive therapeutic tool. Good job holding on to the lead. Yep, all of these things can happen during the working stage. So one of the things I would definitely study is, you know, having the different stages of group theory and what happens during those stages. That would be something you would definitely want to map out, right? What are the stages of group theory and how do they happen? And then also, what are the roles that group leaders can play and group members, right? So group members, remember there's the person who over talks, there's the blamer, there's the, you know, the different roles that people can play within those groups. That's another really important one to study and be attuned to. KC has taken the lead. Good job. Yep. So a working group would have goals that have been jointly decided. Usually a non-working group, a group that's not able to give into the working stage, would have fuzzy, abstract. They'd be running around in circles, not really knowing what to do. We have a new leader. I think it was MRB. Good job. Good job. Most of you got that one. Lots of shuffling, but MRB is holding on to the lead. Good job. Yeah. You got to allow for storytelling. So another thing to just think about in your studying is identifying the different needs. Remember we talked when we were doing lifespan about how we would map out developmental stages and kind of what people would be working on or seeking to accomplish during this stage related to that in groups. So maybe you could have a list of different age levels like pre-K, you know, elementary, middle, high school, college, early work, mid work, you know, pre-retirement, post-retirement, and then you can have individually what are they working on, but then maybe a column that did group. Like if you were doing a group at that age, what would be the considerations for working with a group in that age as well? That would be a good study technique and study strategy. MRB's holding on to the lead. A few more questions. Right, so the answer is informed consent, right? So and you might also see that called disclosure. Unfortunately, I see those two words used interchangeably, and they really do mean different things, but even in the tested things, they're used interchangeably, and they're not. Disclosure is the information we give people, and informed consent is supposed to be what we get back from them, right? So just kind of know how to distinguish those, although they are commonly misused. Oops, Square is in the lead. Good job. These all need to be discussed no matter what the group is, right? So no matter what the group, you got to cover them. But I think when it's a mandated group, there's got to be even more effort to make sure they understand, and that they understand there's still free will, there's still autonomy. This is probably one of the harder ones for people to accept sometimes. It's just because we talk about differences doesn't mean we're going to come to some agreement or solution. Sometimes it's the process of sharing that's important. It's not the need for resolution that's important. Deal. Yep. Because we're talking about decisions. Decisions are cognitive. 2 more questions in this group. Good job. Everybody got that one. Well done. Last question in the group. I had a little humor in some of these. Yeah, evolve from the work that they're doing. Okay, good deal. All right, let's see who our podium is now. 3rd place is Casey. MRB. And square. 24 out of 25 is pretty impressive.
Square is happy.
Oh, it's happy. Okay. And then, oh, I missed the 4th and 5th, but hopefully you guys saw it. All right. Let's go. Next up, I believe, is our theory game. Yes, our theory game. Okay, so that is also in our folder. So we're going to break out into breakout rooms again. Let me show you where it is. So this is the theory game right here. It looks something like this as soon as it comes up. So you have a list of words, all right? It's converting. Microsoft was updated since I had it up last. Slowly. You have a list of words. You'll just trust me on that. You have a list of words. There we go. And those words are all affiliated with different theories. Okay, so there's 2 pages of words, and then you have your theories that are listed, and they tell you how many words fit in each one of those categories. So psychoanalytic has 16 words, Illyrian has 9 words, existential has 5. When I break you out into breakout rooms, what will probably be helpful is if somebody can share their screen and then others call out words to add and have the person fill it in. And there is an answer sheet that will be in the materials afterwards for you too. But you have all the theories and you have how many words fit in each theory. Okay, any questions? Okay, while you're thinking about questions, I am going to do breakout rooms and I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so I am going to just remind everybody, since I just started the recording again, the answers to the theories are in the helping relations folder of the folder I shared with you. So it's one of the subfolders, helping relations. You can find the theory answer to the games. All right, we have just 45 minutes left, so we're going to try to do a couple of other Kahoots to just go over a little bit more material. So our next Kahoot is going to be, oh, assessment, everybody's favorite one, appraisal and assessment. Sorry, that was sarcasm. Okay.
That was.
That was definitely sarcasm. I totally own it, Daryl. All right, let's get to our Kahoots. But after all the tips and tricks I gave you this morning, this one should go smoother than what it might have gone through earlier. So let's see. I think the internet got tired, taking its sweet time. All right, so our Kahoot for assessment is 548-0059. 548-0059. Oh, I like the little paw prints. That's cool. I hadn't seen that one before. Okay. Let's see. All right, let's go ahead and get started. If you're not in, you can join afterwards. The pen will be at the top of the page. So per request, I will not be reading the assignment or the prompts. There we go, SPSS, which is the statistical package for social science. So you may see it written all the way out, or you can just see it as SPSS. So the statistical package for social science. Heart is in the lead, pink heart, with multiple hearts. Okay, so good job. Stats are tools and techniques that we use. Some people said rules and exceptions. Well, yeah, but it's actually the tools that we use to analyze data. And it's not just numbers and letters, although it may feel that way sometimes. It's not just numbers and letters. It's the processes that we go through. Okay, Christy B is taking the lead. All right, good deal. Descriptive. So descriptive statistics are like mean, median, mode, range, standard deviation, things that describe our data set. Rob is taking the lead.
You know, the most frequent choice. It's not the middle. It's not the mode.
All right. So it's mode, okay? So mode is the one that's the most frequent. Remember, you can also have bimodal, multimodal. So you may have a data set and it can have more than one mode. So if there's, you know, 440s, 450s, and 460s, then it's a trimodal or multimodal mode, and you can list all three of those. So it's the one that shows up the most frequent. Rob's holding on to the lead. Good job. Mean is the average. So mean is the average. I can't remember if I have, let's see. Okay. Yep. All right, awesome. Interpreting data. So the difference between descriptive stats and inferential stats is descriptive stats just describe it, whereas inferential, we're making inferences from the population. There's two types of inferential statistics. Parametric, remember the parachute, looks like the normal bell-shaped curve based off probability, and non-parametric, which is not a parachute. It's not based off of population or probability.
I hated this one. This was like all over the place. It can be worse.
Okay, so it's the skew because you've got this really large number right here, right? That's pulling it over to the side. This would be a positive skew. Where the skew is where the outlier is. So the positive, because it's on the positive side of the timeline. A negative skew would have a negative number or smaller number that's pulling it to the left. Right? This is absolutely my favorite class to teach, by the way. So I know it's a little crazy, but I love this stuff. All right, so the more your sample size grows, right, the larger the sample, then the closer you can approximate to the population, right? So the bigger the sample, the more likely it's representative of the sample, which means my standard deviation is going to be more accurate because deviation is how much variance there is. So the more I have, the more people I have, the more accurate I'll be. Rob is holding on to the lead. Usually these questions are done in a little bit of a situational, like you are, you know, a counselor educator and you've administered this many tests and you have a mean and a standard deviation. What's the variance? Or, so, you know, they're going to do something like that. They're going to give you a prompt that has numbers in it and you're going to have to know what to do with the numbers. So to get from standard deviation to variance, you have to do the square root. So, or from variance to standard deviation. So S squared, right, is your variance and S is your standard deviation. So you take the square root of variance and you have standard deviation. So the standard deviation is the small one, small, and the variance is the volume, the big one. Okay, small and volume. So it helps me remember. Rob is on fire and holding the lead. Correlation coefficients, numerical evidence index that reflects the reflection between. Sorry, I'm not supposed to read. Forgot. So used to doing it.
Dr. LA, when you get done with this one, I got a question about the last question.
Okay.
When you get done with this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so correlation coefficient is going to be the relationship between two. What's up, Daryl?
Okay, you said that to find the standard deviation from, I think the number was 9.
Mm-hmm.
You did the square root.
So
Run by that again. I missed
right,
part.
so the variance S equals 9, or
Okay.
S squared equals 9. Then I take the square root of 9 and I get S equals 3.
Gotcha. S equals 3. Gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You are welcome. All right, we're moving on. Okay, remember I said this morning, 1 to 1, right? -1 to +1 is our correlation range. The sign tells me whether it's positive or negative, the direction that it's going. As one goes up, if the other one goes up, or if one goes down and the other one goes down, it's going to be positive. If it is one goes up and one goes down, it's going to be a negative relationship. If it's a 0, it's just flat. It's just a flat line. The strength is determined by the number. Does not matter what the sign is. So do not, when you are asked about the strength of a correlation, do not pay attention to the sign. Okay, only the number. Rob's holding on to the lead. Good job, right? So as it goes up, if they're going in the same direction, whether down or up, doesn't matter, it's still a positive correlation. Rob is on fire. That's an awesome answer streak there. If a correlation between variables is 0.7, what % of variance is not shared? Not shared. Tricky, tricky, tricky. So this one's like a multi-step problem, all right? And so you have to be careful and really pay attention to it. It didn't just say the correlation between the variables is 0.7, what's the difference? That would have been 0.3, okay? It said, what is the % of variance not shared? So that means you have to change it to variance, right? Which is squaring the 0.7. So we have to square 0.7, which gives us 0.49. And then we have to subtract that from 100% to get the variance that's not shared. So it's a multi-step problem. Looks simple when it first pops up, but you got to do both steps. So that means the answer is 51. Okay, good job. Independent variable. So because it depends on it, right? Then that's going to be what is that's going to be what leads to or affects the outcome. So that means that the independent variable. So that means that this is the dependent variable, right? Political affiliation would then be the dependent variable. Hopefully I don't ask you that question next, but if I do, you'll have the answer already. No. Okay. Yep, good job. Hypothesis. Most people got that. And remember, with hypothesis, some of the questions might also be something like, which hypothesis do we test? And it might have null, alternative, research, and then something else that doesn't make any sense. You have to remember, you always test the null hypothesis because of the law of falsification. We're always trying to disprove our theories. So null hypothesis is the tested hypothesis. So your standard deviations, your z-scores always have the same number. Remembering that the z-score is a standardized form of the score so that you can compare different test administrations. So if I have a group of students who take the NCE and a group of students who take the CPCE, I can convert their scores to z-scores and I can compare them to see who did better or who did worse, right? So it's a standardized score, but it aligns with the z-score. numerically at least. Okay, so the answer is 99.5. Remember, you've got your normal bell-shaped curve, okay? The mean, median, and mode, if it's a normally distributed distribution, all are on that same line in the middle, okay? 50% below, 50% above the mean, median, and mode, because mean is the average, median's the middle number, mode is the most frequent number, and that's at the top of the hill, right? Because it has the most data points in it. So mean, median, mode will always be in the center of a normally distributed distribution. One standard deviation out is 68% on average of the data. So you think about that big hill, right, of the normal bell-shaped curve, think about a bunch of dots. So there's more dots that have to hold up that part of the normal distributed curve, right? Because the dots are what are holding that top line. So those are my data sets. 2 standard deviations out, it's now dropping, so there's less coming out, but I still have that 68, so now I have 95% at 2 standard deviations. I go out 1 more standard deviation, and 99.5% of my dots, my data set, is going to be underneath that part of the curve. Okay, so mean, median, mode, 68, 95, 99. And you can visualize that from that chart, from the normal bell-shaped curve. Oh, Katie took the lead. Most commonly used significance level. .05. In social science, 0.05. It means that we're willing to be correct, or we want to be correct at least 95% of the time, and we are willing to accept or tolerate that our answer was found by chance up to 5% of the time. Okay, so that's our tolerance level. Significance level is like a tolerance level. Anything more than that is not going to work. Anything less than that is just a bonus. Bonus. You actually can never achieve a 0 significance level. You can't, because there's always a chance that something else is explaining it. So, last question. To examine the difference, oh, I'm not supposed to read it. I'm going to stop. So used to. That's supposed to have an I at the bottom here. I have a typo. All right, so most of you got it. Good job. Remember, regression does prediction. Dependent sample t-test is a paired t-test. So that's where I have a pre and a post. I cannot have any more than 2 scores. So 1, 2, pre, post, right? I'm comparing the pre and the post. Independent sample t-test is when I have 2 groups with a score and I'm comparing those 2 scores. Group A, group B. I can't have more than 2. T for 2. Right? T for 2. So t-test can only have 2 scores. You can't compare more than 1 score. The reason you can't compare more than 2 scores with t-test is if you do, you have to square your significance level. And if I square my significance level, it means I'm going to have a significance level of 0.25, which is far outside the acceptable level of chance. Right? So we can't do that. So analysis of variance. That's how I can compare 3 or more groups. 3rd place with 16 out of 19, which is pretty darn good. Monet, 17 out of 19. Rob, good job. And 18 out of 19, quite impressive, is Katie G. Good job. Well done. And then 4th and 5th is T and Via Mia. Good job. Let's go to our next one. Let me see what's up next. We're going to do You guys get to pick. We only have time for one more. So research or lifespan. So throw it in the chat which one you would prefer to do. I'll make sure you have access to the other one, but I'm just going to take whichever one comes up the most. Oh, it looks
Hey,
like
Dr. LA,
Mhm.
on what we had just done, I'm just making sure I have that information. It's one of my weakest areas right there. And that's why I had so many questions. Do you recommend any certain book that can review that information?
I do think that this one does a good job of providing an overview of it, right? But again, a lot of the tips and tricks that I've given you today are going to be some of your best resources.
Okay, yeah, I've been writing those down. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just giving you a quick guide to be able to identify what the answer is. I would stick with those. And then just reviewing, like, how do I calculate mean? How do I determine what the mode is?
Gotcha.
How do I calculate median? Because they're not going to ask you like super complex questions. They just want to know that you recognize a concept. Another thing that you might see is, you know, you read an article and you see that the results are T equals 1.05. What type of test was written? Well, if it's a T, it was a T test, right?
Yeah.
If it was a capital F, it was an ANOVA. So knowing the letter that's associated with the outcome, like R for correlation.
So the book you had, which book is that?
That's the Erford text, Erford et al.
Okay, yeah, I want to get that one. Okay, all right.
Yeah, I like this one because it has 4 practice tests. That's a, and it has questions in the actual chapters, which is helpful.
I
Okay.
have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So should we think of assessment on the test as really just the statistics piece? And
No, it could also have tests like validity, reliability. How do you determine that a test, like you have 2 tests and they have validity of this amount. Which test would you use with your client?
Okay, so we don't need to know specific assessments that are used.
You may be asked about, like, they may say, I'm trying to think of an example of one. The WISC, you receive WISC scores on a client that you're seeing at a school-based center. What type of information would you get from the WISC? Well, it's intelligence. Right? So knowing so the big ones, the ones that we see a lot, SAT, ACT, WISC, WASC, all of those, WACE, GATB, like any of the big ones. And again, these books that I've recommended, they give examples, and I have list of key tests in those vocabulary lists in my prep notes that I have for you. Okay. So, but you don't have to know every test that's ever been written. Research is lower than lifespan, Addie. So lifespan has more questions than research. So it looked like lifespan was the winner. So I'm going to go with lifespan. So that's the one we're going to do next. I'll make sure you have access to the research window too. So don't worry about that. You'll have it when I post those probably tomorrow. Okay, here we go. So the pin for our lifespan one is 634-1669. 634-1669. The end. I like that one. The end. Okay, good suggestion, Holly. Remind me, don't let me forget. Emily's saying that lifespan is 9% and research is 11%. I will say though, I think there's also lifespan development questions in the helping relations section too. So some of those developmental theories show up in your helping relations. So I think there's probably more. I think this one is going to be a better review. All right, here we go. If you're still joining, you can still join after this game starts. That is really badly typed. That should be traits shared with others. I have to fix that one. I don't know what happened there. That one had a lot of typos. I see multiple ones. I'll fix that. Right. Mia's in the lead. Maybe via Mia. All right, deal. Good old Freud. Promise that Freud will be somewhere on your exam. Doing something. You definitely want to know your psychoanalytic stages. Okay, Erickson, Maslow, psychoanalytic, they're going to be on there, I promise. So those developmental, the key core developmental theories will be important. Piaget is another one. Make sure you know those guys. Monet's in the lead. Good job. Collective unconscious. Even if you knew one thing, you could figure this one out because there are so many different answers, right? Flower. The daisy is in the lead. Good job, projection. Let's put that stuff off on other people. It's easier to blame them than me. Flowers holding the lead. Still holding on to the lead. This is where I think knowing a little bit of the history of the theorist is helpful, because if you know Adler's story, Adler was isolated as a child because he was very sickly as a child and wasn't really able to connect socially. And so his theory has a lot to do with what he was denied growing up. Watson. A lot of people chose Bandura. Bandura is more self-efficacy, the belief in your ability to do something. There's a second thing that Bandura did too, but it's escaping me right now. Mimia? Yes, good job. Conditioned response or conditioned stimulus. Oh, Monet's moved into the lead. Okay, unlearned. So it's unconditioned, it's unlearned. So phobias is a learned behavior. Like when I was in 7th grade and I put my hand in my coat pocket and had a spider wrap around it. Surprisingly, I did not develop a spider phobia, but I think I passed it on to my daughter. She got it. All right, good job. So understanding operant conditioning, conditional, classic conditioning, the types of reinforcement, all of those will be important behavioral concepts to know. Good job. Negative reinforcement. Good job. A little bit of shuffle. Remember, self-efficacy is our belief that we can do something. So belief would be a thought. All right, moving, shuffling around. Self-efficacy. Maya. Incongruence. A little bit of shuffle. Physiological, so food, shelter, you know, those things need to be met first. Air, you can have air. Mm-hmm. Oh, they just took the lead. Good job. Most of you got that one good. So more on the edge, more on risk taking. So many typos in this one. I gotta fix this one. Okay. Uniform procedures. So that it's the same test, so you're not testing the testing condition, you're testing the actual content. So mental ability, which would include both aptitude and achievement, personality test, or looking at the characteristics that make a person up. So Monet. Just a few more. So somebody asked earlier about assessments. It's more about knowing what the tests do, like the big ones that you see and hear about on a regular basis, than really knowing like the details of it. It's more knowing kind of what does this test do and what might it be used for. Validity. And he's holding on to the lead. Just a couple more questions. Reliable. Yep. Most of you got that one. That one went pretty fast. Good job. Superiority. Social connectedness and superiority for Adler. 2 more questions. Personal growth, that's at the top of the pyramid, right? Social, let's see, actual self-actualization, personal growth. Last question. Good job. Let's see who our winners are.